Hello and welcome to the sixth part of this web development series where we are creating a drop-down which is filled with data dynamically from a MySQL database. So in this part we'll be creating PHP scripts to fetch the information from the database and display it as JSON, as a JSON file, which the JavaScript can then read to load, which will then allow it to insert it into the HTML file in the end. So we're going to be creating PHP scripts to fetch the database, the data from the database. So let's go create a new file, PHP file, and let's first make get makes. It's a simpler one. So we'll say get makes.php, and remember your PHP brackets like so. Okay, so now we've already created a script to connect to the database and open a connection, so we just need to require those scripts. So we go require space open db.php, and then I'm just going to put at the bottom require close db.php, and that just goes at the end of our coding, so it will close the connection afterwards. So now when we open the database, we need to query the database now. Okay, so we need to create a query. So let's create a SQL query. So let's go $query equals, and let's do this inside phpMyAdmin so we can actually see what's going on. So we'll go here and we'll go to the SQL tab. Now let's go select, and now we're going to select the makes. Now we don't need a make ID. We don't need the ID. It's not going to come in handy ever. We only need the make itself. So we just go select make, the name column from makes. That tells us, it just to select the name column from makes. So let's try that. I'm just going to copy it into my clipboard and then click go here. And you'll see it's just got the name column from the makes database. And that's all we want, okay? Because this is just going to populate the makes drop down with the phone brands. So let's go to our code, and our query string will be that. That's it. Now, when we use select, it means that the query is going to return something. Okay, so we need to assign that data that it's returning to a variable. So we'll create a variable called data equals MySQL underscore query, the link, so the connection, which is the con object, and then query, like so, to the data. So now we have the data. So we need to read this data so we can turn it into a JSON file. Okay, so in PHP, before we get started, in PHP we create a JSON file by assigning all the values that we want inside that JSON to an array. So we create an array with everything that we want to display in the JSON file, and we assign all our values, our data to those. We transfer the data to the array, which is then converted into a JSON file. So let's go create a new array. I'm going to call it makes, and then equal array, open bracket, closing bracket, nothing in between. That's it. Now we need to read the data from that data variable. So to do this, we'll go while, open bracket, $row equals MySQL fetch underscore array, so it's MySQL underscore fetch underscore array, and then the object we want to fetch, get data from, so that's data, like that. And then inside here, your next line, your open curly brace and your closing brace. Okay, so now we need to add the row, the name column of that row to the makes array. So to do this, we want to push it to the array, so we'll go array underscore push, and now with the array object we want to push the value to, which is makes, and then the value we want to push, so it would be row square brackets and the name of the column that we want to assign to we want to add. So it would be name. We want to assign the name value like that, and that's it. So now that will add all the names of all the makes of phones to the makes array. Now all we need to do is display the JSON. So it's simple. We just go echo JSON encode. So it actually has a JSON encode function, and then inside there makes. Okay, so we want to encode the makes array, and that's it for the makes of the phones. So if we go and preview this in the browser, let's quickly do that. So when you preview it in the browser, this is the result. It's you'll see this is JSON, and it's basically a JavaScript array of all the makes of phones. So now that we've done the makes, let's do the models. So let's go back to our code, and let's make another PHP file and call it getModels.php. Okay, so let's do our PHP brackets like so. Now it's exactly the same code basically with a different query string. Okay, that's actually the only difference. So we can copy this code and paste it here. Okay, so it's just a query that's going to be different. So let's go to our browser so that we can play around, create a SQL query. So once again we want to get data, so we'll say select, and we want to select the name column of the models table. So we go models.name, and there's a reason I'm including the table name, you'll see now. Select models.name from. Okay, now this from, we say from models. Okay, so now we're just selecting everything. Okay, but we don't want to select everything. We want to join in the makes. We want to only select the rows where the make ID is equal to the make ID inside, the ID inside the makes table. Okay, so we go inner join, so I'm just going to do enter, inner join makes. Okay, so now we're joining the makes table to the models table, and we say on. So now it's going to join, it's only going to return the values, it's going to join them where models, so it's now joining the two tables together. So now we're going to have the models.make underscore ID equals the makes.id. So now we're basically going to replace the makes.id column with the actual names of the brands. Okay, this is a bit confusing, don't worry, it's it'll make sense when we run the query. Okay, and now so this is just going to inner join them. Okay, but that's useless. We need to actually, now it's going to return all of the phones. So once again it's a where, so where, and it's makes.name, and now we use a special word called like, so it's not equal, it's like the make. So let's try Samsung. Okay, like that, inside single quotes. So I'm just going to copy it to clipboard and click go, and you'll see we have all our Samsung phones. Okay, so what it did was it took that string, it matched it to the correct make, it went and fetched the corresponding brand name for that make ID, and it matched this to that brand name, and it only returned all the values, all the all the rows where that make ID matched the brand name. So where the brand name matched our Samsung or Sony. So we can try Samsung, we can do Sony or Apple. Let's try Apple, and you'll see it returns all the apples, and that's perfect. Okay, because we can use this data exactly how we can now just simply convert that into an array. So let's go to our code. With that, we have this script in our clipboard. Let's go to our code, and let's go to the query string here. Let's go and paste. Okay, now I just want to put it all on one line like so. So I'm just going to put it all on one line like that. And then at the end, there's one change we have to make, is this must always be equal to a variable. Okay, and that variable we're passing in. So we're going to call, so you know when you search on Google or something, you know you get that google.com and then it's like a question mark q equals, and then it's like this whole term. We're going to have our own. We're going to have question mark make equals Samsung or whatever, and it's going to match the, it's going to basically, we're going to extract that value and we're going to use it in our query. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, and it's very important. What if we assign that? What if we call that page, but we don't have that make variable defined? What will happen is our code will crash because it won't be able to find a make variable. It will be undefined, which means our SQL won't work, which means we won't get a value, which means the whole thing will break. Okay? So we need an if statement. So all of this should actually be contained in an if statement. So we should do if, and then there's a function called isSet. Okay, and what isSet does is it checks, does this variable exist? So we want to check, does the make variable exist? And the way to access that variable is $_get, like that, square brackets, double quotes, make, like so. So if that is set, then do the following. Okay, so if it's not set, then it won't load anything. Okay, then it'll just display a blank page, it won't return anything. Okay, so if it is, let's go and just assign that whole _get equals make. Let's just make it simpler to reference and just say I'll make equals _get make, like that. And then if we go to our SQL query here, at the end here, you see we must just replace this Samsung with that variable. Now, with strings, instead of concatenating strings and all of that in PHP, there's a trick. You can just go curly bracket, opening curly bracket, closing curly bracket, and in between those two curly brackets, we can go $make, like that. Okay, so you can see it will replace that curly brackets with the value of this make variable. So this is basically, yeah, that should be it. But now, oh wait, let's go and just change the, I'm just going to change this, like the makes array, to models, just to make it more relevant. So models, and finally models, and that's it. So let's see what it looks like in the browser. Okay, so it's blank, and the reason for that is, as I said, we put in that if statement to check if our make variable was defined, because right now if that if statement wasn't there, our page would be broken and it would show error messages and all of that. So at least now we have a catch, so it doesn't display anything. So let's go question mark make equals, now let's think of a brand, let's try Samsung, enter, and you can see it's listed all the Samsung phones which it has fetched from the database. Let's try Apple, and it lists all the Apple phones. Sony lists all the Sony phones. BlackBerry lists all the BlackBerry phones. So now we actually So now we also have a script that will fetch the phone models based on a variable we provided with. Okay, so that's cool. So now that we've created these two scripts, we can now connect to these two pages using JavaScript, Ajax, and we can fetch this, and we can actually then put these values into a drop down using JavaScript. Okay, so we'll cover that in the next part. Thanks for watching. I'll see you just now.